Imagine working your whole life, pouring sweat into a piece of land your father and grandfather fought to keep. Then one morning, you wake up and realize that land isn't yours anymore, or at least, that's what the HOA wants you to believe. My name is Mark, and I owned a valley that had been in my family for 3 generations. On that land was a dam, a small one my grandfather built to manage. The creek that flowed through our property, for us it was more than just water. It was life, it was history, and it was the line between what was ours and what wasn't. So when a homeowners association decided to build 35 homes on my land without asking, without paying, without even respecting the boundary lines, they didn't just steal dirt, they stole legacy, and they thought I'd stay quiet. But when you push a man too far, when you spit on everything he's worked for, you leave him with only one option: to remind you whose land you're standing on. It all started small. The HOA from the neighboring subdivision approached me years ago about selling a slice of my land. They said they wanted to expand, build more homes, raise property values. I told them politely but firmly, not for sale. That land wasn't just dirt, it held the dam, the creek and the fields where my kids used to play. Months went by. Surveyors came around. I assumed they were working on their side. Then construction trucks started showing up, on my side of the markers. At first it was a driveway, then a foundation. I drove over, told the foreman he was trespassing. He shrugged, waved some paper in my face, and said the HOA had approved it. Approved what? They had no deed, no contract, no signature, just arrogance. I filed complaints with the county. I went to the zoning board. I even hired a lawyer. But every time, the HOA slowed things down with paperwork, legal tricks, and money I didn't have. And by the time my case was even looked at, 10 homes had already been built. Then 20. Then 35. Families moved in. Fences went up, and suddenly, my land didn't look like mine anymore. But here's the thing they forgot. All those houses, all those driveways, all those lawns, they were downstream from my dam. I tried to resolve it peacefully. I went door to door, telling the new homeowners that the ground beneath them wasn't theirs. Some listened. Most laughed. The HOA board treated me like a nuisance. They even fined me for trespassing when I stepped onto my own soil. One night I sat by the dam, listening to the water build against the old concrete. My grandfather's words came back to me. The land remembers who it belongs to. Water always finds its way home. That's when the idea took root. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I did want to remind them, every last one of them, that you can't steal from a man who owns the river. So I prepared, quietly. I checked the old mechanisms on the dam. Rusted, yes, but still functional. I reinforced certain gates, weakened others. I waited for spring, when the snow melt from the mountains would feed the creek until the reservoir behind. The dam was swollen and restless. By April, the pressure was humming in my ears every time I stood near it. And the homes, those neat little cookie-cutter houses, sat smugly just below the valley slope, right where the water would go. The night I opened the dam was quiet. Too quiet. I remember standing there, my hand on the lever, heart pounding like a war drum. The HOA president had just threatened to sue me for unauthorized activity on my own land that morning. That was the last straw. I pulled. At first, nothing, just the groan of rusted metal. Then it happened, a thunderous crack, followed by the roar of water that had been waiting for release. The creek turned into a flood, racing down into the valley like it had been chained for decades and was finally free. From my vantage point, I watched lights flick on in the houses. Car alarms blared. People stumbled into their yards in pajamas, screaming as water surged past their driveways, tore through their manicured lawns, and swallowed fences whole. The HOA board members? They stood in the street, powerless, shouting at each other as if yelling could stop a flood. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just watched the water claim what had always been mine. By morning, the neighborhood was unrecognizable. Roads cracked. Yards were mud pits. Basements filled with water. No one was hurt, thank God, but the damage was undeniable. The county finally took notice. Lawyers scrambled. The HOA pointed fingers, but every investigation led back to one simple truth. They built on land that wasn't theirs. My deed proved it. My water proved it. In the end, the families were forced to move. Insurance refused to pay because the construction was illegal. The HOA dissolved in disgrace, bankrupt and hated by its own members. And me? I stood by the dam watching the creek settle back into its natural course. Did I feel guilty? A little. Those families had been pawns in a bigger game. But the board? The ones who thought they could steal a man's land with papers and threats? They got exactly what they deserved. Because when you build 35 homes on another man's land, you'd better pray he doesn't control the river,